All right, we're back. It is COMP229. That's Advanced Web Application Development here at Centennial Fall 2016 semester, and it's week 4. Things are rolling. Part 1 of our broadcast. What I want to talk about today at the beginning is problems you guys are having with assignment 1. So let's talk about those things. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to put up this poll, see if I can get in there. It's like that. Maybe it is. I'm going to put up a poll, and let's see if we can do this kind of stuff. So I'll say what problems are you having with? Okay, so I'll tell you about this poll in a second where you get this. So the first one would be, you know, just not enough time. That might be one option, right? Technical problems, with a live site, right? So that might be another one. Like for example, Azure, right? If you're using Azure for bonus marks, right? Or the school server if you're using the school server. Okay. Part 2 or another one. No problem, just enough time, just not enough time. Technical problems with live site. We'll put in something else, like for example, I've seen problems like this. Master pages. I've seen problems like that, right? And I'll add one more, and I'll put assignment 1. What assignment 1? Right? I'll just put in that, you know, that kind of stuff. I'll create this thing, right? And it's a quick poll right now. So here's the poll, right? If you want to, you can, if you go to pollev.com/learn, you can do that, or you can text at learn. You can text learn to 37607 to log in, and then choose A, B, C, or D, right? To the poll. So if you see this is a live poll, and I'll maximize the screen here so we can see what it looks like in its full glory, right? pollev.com/learn, right? No problems, just enough time, not just not enough time. And I probably could have put in other too, like other. No. All right, technical problems with live site. I see that. Like you can't put images up, you can't, you know, make it go, those kind of things. Master pages, right? It's a silly kind of poll, and you can, and you know, you may want to try and you jokers, right? Assignment 1. If you haven't started assignment 1 by now, you all need to get in a headlock. I got to put you all in a wrestling headlock. A Greek, you know, seriously, you ever see Greek wrestlers, right? They used to oil themselves up, get all oily, grab onto you, and, like, you know, get you into a headlock, right? Back in the days, in the ancient days, you should all get a Greek wrestler to wrestle with you. If you haven't got like your, I don't know what the assignment is by now, right? Okay, I'm just joking around there, but what I'm saying is, you know, by now you guys should all know what this thing is. So it looks like most of it is just not enough time. I understand that, guys. Technical issues with Azure. Not a lot with master pages. This is good. Master pages, I had a couple questions with that, and okay, that's enough. Getting tired now of this crazy thing. We'll just turn this thing off. All right, there we go. So looks like just not enough time. That's good. That's a good thing if it's not enough time. If it was anything else, you know, as an example, it would be bad, right? If it was something else other than just not enough time. Most of it's not enough time. Some people have problems with live site, but most of the times these other things, master pages, and most people are not joking around, right? This is just a joke, right? I could have put other too. I'm sure there's people who have other problems. I've addressed this one. That's just you guys not starting enough. Just to give you an example, last week, out of 30-something of you, 35, 36, we only had 5 people who had somewhat started, right? That's really bad, right, for you guys. And and that's, I'm not saying I'm not blaming anybody. It's just that, you know, you got to get started on this stuff, especially with the web. Web is unpredictable. It's the hardest to develop on, in my opinion. And the reason why is it consistently changes. There's lots of testing to be done from the very beginning, and it's kind of finicky the way it works, especially when you deploy live to a site like Azure. Bonus, right? If you can't make it work on Azure, you still need to make it work somewhere, right? So that means the school server is an option if you want to do the school server, or if you have an alternate server someplace live. So if I go to your site, you got to give me a URL. I'm going to go to that and I'm going to do it. If you don't provide a live site or some kind of URL, marks, right, out of what this thing is worth. So it doesn't make any sense for you not to supply a live link. I recommend that you you get that part done. Problems with Azure. A lot of times when we work with Azure or live sites, that's the biggest problems when it comes to getting your images working. Images are there. If you've uploaded your images and they're there, a lot of times the path. And go and do a console log, right? And I'm going to look at some of the. I'm going to give you some examples. Okay, so I had some stuff here on. Let's go back to the actual. Here's our little log, right? And Rootfic, you know, you had some. Where's Rootfic? Your images. Okay, who had? I think it was you that had problems. Did you figure it? Yeah, was it pathing? Yes, that's true too. Oh, that's another issue. Okay, thank you for that. So there's a couple of things. One of them is pathing. If I go to a site, let's go to another site here. So let's say I'm going to choose a random site here that I don't know I like to go to. I'm going to use something like Reiner's Tile Sets. There we go. So for those people who do gaming with me, then Reiner's Tile Sets is a place we get some, you know, some application, assets that he makes. This guy, he's a German guy, I guess, with Blender. Anyways, if I go to inspect, a lot of times what you'll see on the console, if there's any errors in the console, if there's a pathing problem, it'll say like, I'm sorry, can't find it. It's a 404. I can't find a specific image or whatever here to just get to the console, so I have something to show you. And that's one of the major things that are involved. If the pathing is wrong to your image, it won't work. The other one is if I'm in Visual Studio. I'm in Visual Studio, and I'm going to open up a previous. Please do this with me. Let's open up last week's lesson, okay? Because we're going to make a template from lesson number 3. I don't want to retype all that stuff we did last week. I want to kick off from there this week. Kick off lesson number 3. So if I go to lesson number 3, so I'm going to kind of open my my project or solution, the right place, which is COMP229. Of course, there's no projects in COMP229. But let's let me just go file. I'm just going to leave Azure and go back in. And if, let's say, you can't find it, we'll get back to this in a second. Let's say you can't find it, so I'm going to kind of kick off. Here's Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, so it should be able to direct you to where COMP229 is for the lesson 3. And if you can't, you can always download it from GitHub, which I'm going to show you how to do, both things. Okay, so let's see how we can do this. It's loading, Visual Studio 2015. And once it's done loading, it's going to give you a start screen. People who remember Visual Studio. One day, when it decides to answer. I don't know why this is up here. All right, so here's my start screen. And if you've opened up stuff, for example, you know that COMP229 F2016. If I open this up with lesson 3, here it is. It's my open project. Okay, so this is what we did last week. So we left it off with our contact page, which we're gonna kind of do a few modifications to this week. I kind of kill all these files. So this is what we're starting with, right? It looks like this. This is what we have from last week. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to start over. I want to take this page here and I want to spin it into an actual site. Now we have home, project, services, about, and contact, like half what you needed to get started with your site. So I mean, if you just left it after we talked about it last week and you did something else, wow. I bet you if I went around today and I looked around and I just saw this with your portfolio site, who just has this? You know, if okay, if all you have is this, I'm talking like this. So you haven't done anything else. You haven't done your logo. You haven't done anything. That means you didn't do anything from the last time we were together, right? And that's why people need time, because they haven't worked on this stuff at all. But you know, this is what we started with last week. So it gave you kind of a basis to start from. And today we're going to be working with something called Contoso University. That's what we're going to be building. And if you search that up, if you go Contoso University, and then we'll see web forms, right? If you look at that, Microsoft, there's a Microsoft kind of tutorial that you can step yourself through, which we're going to be talking about. Now this one uses ASP.NET 4 to your kind of the same version of your book. With Visual Studio 2010, we're obviously going to move this into something that's a little bit more modern, but really what we're going to be building as of today, starting today, is this Contoso University stuff. And instead of me stepping through all these steps, I'm going to be talking about this. Let me just put this in. So I'll give you this link, and I'll put it up on. I'll shoot this up on Slack for you guys. So here's Slack. Also University walkthrough. Right, that's what this is. Now this details a lot of stuff, and we're going to be talking about this. All the walkthrough for Contoso University. It's kind of a step-by-step on how to create with the entity framework, with kind of using a database-first approach. We're going to modify this going forward, but that's what we're going to be working on starting today. A couple of weeks, maybe right up into the exam, maybe 2 or 3 weeks to work on this database stuff. Why? Because we're going to be adding authentication, connecting to the database, and so on. Now, one thing we're going to do also as of today is we're going to be connecting to a local database. I'm going to be talking about that today. All right. Let's go back to our project. So if I go to Visual Studio, I'm going to just kill this for a second. We'll go back there. But this is our starting point, right? So how do I start from this, and how do I create a template from this site? Because I want to use this site as our template site, right? And what is a template anyway? Think about it as a way to start, instead of starting from scratch, with something, okay? Let's do that very easily. I've kind of done this with you. If you've taken COMP229 with me, we've kind of done templates before, so this should be a review for you. But if you haven't done COMP229 with me, then this will be something new, okay? So how do we do a template? So first, I got to launch 3. Okay, here's lesson 3. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say File, my template. Don't worry, if you don't have lesson 3 or you lost lesson 3, wait for it. I'm going to put lesson 4 up, right, in a second, right, on GitHub. And then you'll have lesson 4. But I'm showing you how to do a template because you're going to need to do this for your project. You're going to need to do this kind of stuff, right? I'm creating a template. And again, just going back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go. I've got my solution project, which is, or my project COMP229 Fall 2016 Lesson 3 from last week. And again, if you don't have access to that and you want to follow along, you can go to Centennial, right? And if you go to Centennial, you can see that I have a lesson from last week, which is F2016 Lesson 3. That's the one I'm going to start with today. So if you don't have what I have, go here, download it, and then you can launch from there. Home, and you're watching this remote, you can certainly do that as well. Or if you have a little bit of patience, I will show you how to, I will upload, and then you can start from there, right? But you can watch me what I'm doing because you need to do a template in the future. All right, so File, again, export template, a project template or an item template. I want to do a project template. If I have more than one project, it'll be listed here. I can pull down whatever project I want inside my solution. Remember, that when I make I have a solution in Visual Studio projects, right? For example, if we can have a testing project that we're working with. Now, it's going to give me the template name, which is COMP229 F2016 lesson 3. That's okay. And then you can give it a description. Like, for example, if I really wanted to, I can put something like, template or web forms, right? Template for web forms. How about that? First template for web forms. And if you really want to, you can give it an image. You can take a snapshot and give it an image for the template, some kind of preview of what it looks like. So an icon and a preview, and we'll show you what those look like in a second. And then it says automatically import the template into Visual Studio, which I want to do. I want to keep these clicked. Okay, it's going to go do its magic in a second. It's going to take my project and spin it into a zip file. All right, zip file. Okay, that is your template. And don't unzip the zip file. Leave it zipped. All right. All it's going to do is generate a file. Okay. And I'm sure if I scroll down, it's going to show me the zip file. For you, it'll just show you the zip file right away. Okay. Now I'm going to close my solution. So File, close my solution. So I've exported my template. Step 1, my solution, and I'm opening up a new project. All right. So I'm going to say File, Project, right, in Visual Studio, and under Web, I don't want to use my standard web templates anymore for today. I want to go to Visual C#, down somewhere down near the bottom, and you can see that there are several templates I have. One of them is COMP229 F2016 lesson 3. You can also search for it up here. You can say, right? And if you do that, you'll only pull up the template that we just made, which is COMP F229 F. Okay, cool. I want to rename this down here because obviously it's not going to be called lesson 31, all right? The lesson 4, right? Or in your case, it might be, as an example, maybe you're going to do another lesson project. You might call this project 1, which we're going to talk about in a second. You can call it whatever you like. All right, but this is lesson 4 for us, okay? And it's going to go into a specific folder. I am going to create a directory for solution like normal and repository. And if you haven't got this, that means you haven't been using Git, which means chances are for assignment 1, you're going to lose 4 marks for that, right? So please click on Add to Source Control if you haven't done it already. That'd be very bad if you haven't done this, and press OK. Take lesson 3, change the names across all of lesson 3, and make it into lesson 4. Why is this good? Why don't I just rename lesson 3 to lesson 4 manually? That's a waste of time. It'll just make you crazy if you do that. Okay? So we don't want to do that. So we have all the stuff we did from lesson 3 we have, but now it's called lesson 4. Hey, this is a great place to do our GitHub repository, right? So I'm going to go to Team Explorer, changes. If there's any change that will be listed here, there's none because we're using the basic project. I'm going to go back to Home, and Sync, Visual Studio 2015 with Enterprise, and the GitHub extension. You should see this image, which means we have access to GitHub. I'm going to click Getting Started or Get Started. It's going to say, okay, which GitHub repository do I want to account do I want to connect to? Not this one. Yours is going to be Centennial. Repository is going to be called COMP229 F2016 lesson 4. Surprise, surprise. Right? Then I'm going to click. It is stupid easy now with Visual Studio. Right? If you were with me on JavaScript, it was much harder because everything was command line. Visual Studio, it's nice and easy. Okay, good. Let's test to see if it's there. I'm going to go back onto the Mac side, right? And you should have, if you missed something, and if you couldn't get this done, if I go to Centennial now, you can see that my first repo on the top is lesson 4, right? So if you couldn't follow along, or if I went too fast and I created a template and you couldn't do it, okay? I'm going to be putting up all my code in this one today. Everything we need for database starting today, right, is going to be here. Now, what am I going to do next week? I'm going to use a template today, this week. I'm going to make a template and make lesson 5, right? Lesson 5 will have more database connection stuff. There is a problem, and I want to put it out to you. I'm going to be connecting to my local database in a second, right? That's part of our walkthrough, is connecting to a database. Centennial, and actually at other colleges and universities, is they've locked down the ports to connect to a database that's live on Azure. A database live on Azure? Yes, you can, and I'm going to show you how to do that today, right? But you won't be able to connect to that database from school. It just will fail, right? Even if you make it. And as a Microsoft Imagine members, formerly DreamSpark, right? A number of different SQL databases for free. Your project number 1 requires a database, and we have to talk about how do I add that in. As an example, when I can't connect live because there is no database live, what do I do, right? So there's a bit of complications here when it comes to this because we don't have access, unfortunately, to SQL Server. Okay. So that's the first thing. We're going to work with this project today. So we've talked about your assignment number 1, which is due Friday at midnight, no extensions, right? However, you can hand it in late for 20% penalty if you really want to, right? Project number 1, I want to talk about what this thing is. So it's called the Game Tracker, all right? It's a team project 1, and if you notice, it's listed Centennial, all right? So here's this team project. I'm going to skip the due dates and all that stuff for a second and go back down here. So working with a partner or solo, I highly recommend do not work solo on this project, right? You will build an ASP.NET Web Forms application that will track 4 contests for each calendar week. Okay. Just there alone, how do I do that? How do I track for each calendar week? We're going to talk about what your interface is going to look like, right? Think about that. If I'm going to track 4 games, it means on the page, the tracker page, tracking page, right? The game tracker, when you go there, there's going to be 4 games displayed. There has to be 4 games displayed, okay? Different ways to display them. You can display them in columns. Game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4. You can do that. You can display it in quadrants, right? So right, bottom left, bottom right. That's another way to do it, right? You could display it in swim lanes. Game 1, game 2, across. Game 3, I don't recommend this, by the way. Game 4, right? Right? And there's other ways to do that. You could display things in circles. Game 1, game 2, game 3, right? There's lots of ways to do this kind of stuff, right? The challenge that we're going to have is, how do I switch from one week to the next? Every week is what I want to get statistics for. Okay. And how many weeks can I get statistics for? That's another question, because you're going to say, Tom, how many weeks do I have to add data for? Because you have to kind of create this data or get it from somewhere, right? And what kind of games can I track? For example, maybe you want to track things like, what's a popular game that you like to look at? What was that? Okay. Comment, show me what you're talking about. Type it in. Asphalt 8? Like this? That's crazy, right? Okay. Asphalt 8. Okay. So it's an app. Now, is it a video game like on an Android device, or is it an Android game? Okay. How can you track that though? That's kind of, is there a status, or is there kind of any kind of, and is it more of a social game that you can track with other people? All right, so it's on Facebook. This thing, let's see what this thing looks like. So this is a game, and let's say, for example, I want to track scores. You could certainly do that, but the thing is, you need to know who the teams are. What to look for is the teams or the players that are playing the game. Let's think of another example, more like a sports game. Is there a sport that someone likes? FIFA. Is it going right now? You have to have a game that's really going right now, like a real game that's happening right now. FIFA right now, okay. So if I was going to go FIFA 2016, right? We're talking about, let's take a look at this. Is that the one?
No,
that's the video game, right? No, it's good. This is good. FIFA.com, right? So interactive World Cup. This is World Cup, so this is done, like grand finale 2022, right? other things, like for example, other games, you have to get game data from somewhere. So what games are you looking at right now? What games do you follow? What teams do you follow? Real Madrid? Okay, so FIFA, maybe we'll look at something like FIFA Real. Sorry? Yeah, I know, it's a club, Real Madrid, right? So you can go into Ultimate Team Players and Ratings, and you can look at live scores. Something that's currently playing right now, right? So here's some example of some team score. This is actually a site that does team scores, right? For example, versus Real Madrid club, you know, this kind of stuff. It was 2-2 full time, and it was the last game was September 27th. That was yesterday. So there's some information about teams, and if you notice, they're displaying a bunch of teams in a row, right? Or a bunch of games. One of them is Real Madrid, and the other ones are the other teams. Okay, so you got this and so on. So you're displaying some information. This is the kind of thing I want you to do. It doesn't have to be sports. You could make it between two players. You could be tracking video games. You want to track. You could track other things. Track at least 4 games per week, per calendar week. Calendar week would be from, and again, everyone's different, but for my calendar week, I kind of rate it from Sunday to Monday, Sunday to Saturday, Saturday to Sunday. Sorry, Sunday to Saturday. I was right. Sunday to Saturday. That's one calendar week for me. And the way to look at that is if I was going to look at, like, let's say a calendar week, calendar week. What week am I in? Current calendar week. Current calendar week we're in. You can see that we're week 39 right now. Okay, that's what's the current week. Week number is 39 because every year, right? Starting from the first week of the year in January, it's up to the end, up to December 31st. So there's 52 weeks from Sunday to Saturday, as an example. Now, if you notice, it says here week 39 is from Monday, the 26th, until Sunday. So they do tracking from Monday to Sunday. By the way, it doesn't matter to me how you track your weeks, as long as you track each calendar week. Okay, so if I'm making a database and I have 4 teams that I'm tracking, everything for every calendar week, you're going to have different tables. Have you had database before? Right? Think about the tables you're going to be creating in your SQL database, right? What tables do you need when we're talking about this stuff? Think about it in your head as we're talking requirements, right? To track every calendar week. Let's go back to the assignment. So again, you're going to be tracking 4 different teams or contests for each calendar week. The tracking page will display the weekly statistics of each game. So if I've got 4 games. Each game will have at least 2 teams or 2 sides. It could be like person. Okay, it could be 2 teams that are fighting against each other. Example, if I don't know if you're crazy about chess and you want to, I don't know, maybe there's some kind of chess contest that happens every single week, and you want to track individuals, right? Who's the kind of a chess tracker or whatever. Or maybe you like playing Magic the Gathering, Magic every Friday, right? I'm just putting it out there, and you want to check out games against 2 different players, professional players. I don't want to say other games. There's other kinds of games you can track too, like for example, poker. If you really want to track poker, or if you want to track something like if there was some kind of game, kind of boxing games or golf or something, you can do all that. Anything you choose is up to you. Any kind of contests, as long as there's 4 of that kind of contest per calendar week. Calendar week, it's not enough. It won't meet my criteria. There's got to be 4 of those kind of contests, like we just saw in soccer, per calendar week. How many calendar weeks am I going to ask you to track for me? All right. This is a prototype we're making. Okay, we're not making a real application that's going to track every single calendar week of the bloody year, right? So we have to be reasonable. And what I'm going to ask you to do is at least track 4 calendar weeks. Okay. At least 4. Don't do 10. Okay. Don't do 20 or 50. That's crazy. Yes. Weeks times 4 games per week. So I can look from one week to the other. How do I move? I want you to think about this. If I was going to look at each page, how do I move from one page to the other? I got to have some kind of navigation controls. So when I move to the next page, I see the next calendar week of data. That's all it's going to have. My UI isn't going to really change with the data from the other week. Okay, That means that the data is going to come from a table in the database. Okay, think about this. We have to think about how to. Again, if you don't know how to do this yet, don't worry, because we're going to be talking about how to connect to databases and all that stuff, and connect with the entity framework over the next few weeks. It's not something that you're going to be handling by yourself. All right, but I still want you to start as soon as possible on the concept. I'm going to be talking about that piece too. First thing is, there's two teams or two sides, if you will, and your web application will record which team won the game. Okay, so who won? Right? Your web app will also measure how many points were scored. Okay, so an example of that Real Madrid game, let's go back to that, like live scores, right? You see that it's 2-2 in full time, right? As an example, 2-2 there, total. 4 points were scored, right? Who won? Nobody, right? It was a tie. Win, you know, for one team, win for the other team, or a tie. You have to record those kind of options, right? How about this? What's this? Right? Isn't that what that means? I think these games haven't happened. October 2nd, and if you notice what the percent, these are kind of. Let's look at current playing games. These are current playing games. If I go. These are from these championships. Let's see if there's any matches. These are matches that are happening right now. Okay, so the 27th, and you can see that there's some matches here. Who won this game? Who won this game? No one. Who won this game? These guys. Who won these games? No one. And then you can see this guy. These guys won this game. See all the wins on this side. Points scored. How many points were scored in this game? 1. How many points were allowed, as an example, by this team? That means how many points were scored on this team? 1. How many points scored on this team? 0. Even though it says the total score, these guys scored 1 point. 1 point was scored on these guys. 0 points were scored on this one. Okay, how about this one? You have 2 points here, right? 1 score was allowed on each player. Total points were scored was 2. 2 were scored on this one, or 2. These guys allowed 0, 2, and it was 2-0, right? When I say points allowed or points scored or whatever, from each team, you can give those kind of statistics. Why? Because if you think about it from a global perspective, you can think about how many total points that team scored over a period of 4 weeks. Total points allowed into the net or whatever, or into their side, right? So you kind of creates a statistic for those kinds of points, right? For example, this team scored 4 points. This game scored 4 points, but these guys scored all the points, not these guys. Here, similarly, we've also scored 4 points in this game. I wish it was like a 3-1. That would be a better kind of scenario, but there isn't a 3-1 so far. And as you can see that there's different statistics that these teams collect. I don't need all these statistics. I want you to track specifically, and this is for any kind of game or any kind of contest. Okay, even if you don't have to track a real contest, make it up. Make 2 kinds of games that you're tracking. Okay. The exercise isn't about real life tracking. The exercise is about database access. All right. Let's break it down to what it's supposed to be. Right. Your web app will also measure how many points were scored and how many points were allowed or lost for each team. So how many points they scored, how many points were lost from each team, all right? And how many spectators watched. That's a different kind of statistic. Maybe you play a game and there's like 300 spectators. Maybe one of those big Real Madrid games, maybe there's 10,000 spectators if it's a little bit bigger. I want you to track additional things. All this is doing fields to fill in, just data fields. I want you to think about that. So if I'm saying spectators tracked, points allowed per game. Each game, there's going to be 4 games per page. Each game is going to have these stats. So if I've got 2 teams, right, those 2 teams are going to have a bunch of stats, and it's going to be repeated 4 times in a row. We'll talk about some user interface designs for this one. You must ensure that you deploy appropriate user input validation throughout your web application. if you allow the user to enter whatever they want, they could break your page. Listening for the kind of game, like the user in this scenario should be able to enter the statistics, okay? Example, I enter the statistics on my page, right? So one of the things is displaying the data. The other part is entering the data. I should be able to use your game tracking page, teams that I'm tracking, and the data that come with the team, right? That means you got to stop the user from entering data that doesn't make any sense. This week, in terms of a little bit, we're going to be talking about that more, right? Okay, why? So if I enter data, you should enter, let's say, a few weeks of data, and then I'm going to try and enter the data with your page and break your page. I'm going to try and break your page. I'm going to try and put in images. I'm going to try and throw down some stuff, numbers or whatever, and you should stop me from doing that. Now, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can use things like spinners to spin up the number, like limit the numbers. You can do those kind of things. And check for if the data is valid before they press the submit button, right? So enter new game data or whatever, right? Page to make sure there's no errors. And then if there's an error, you can display a red message that says, man, I'm sorry, but you've got an error in this line, which most websites do. The weekly results will be recorded in a database using appropriate tables and relations, okay? So I'm not going to tell you what tables to create for yourself. I want you to map it out for yourself. What are the tables that I need for this thing? Well, I'm going to need some kind of table for the teams, right? That could be something you might want to do. So maybe I have 14. I have a table with all the teams listed. The team table has all the statistics for the team, like total statistics, right? Not just for that particular week, but the totals, kind of summary. One table. Then there'd be another table for games, right? You could have games table, or you could have a week, each calendar week table for all the weeks of the year, the entire weeks of the year, right? One table. So week 1, game 1, game 2, game 3, game 4. You can have different columns for those things, and you can break down all the numbers for each of the weeks in your columns. You can do that too, right? There's many ways to approach this problem. Thinking about how I'm going to represent the data both in the database and on the page in front of me. Okay, any questions up to this point? Little scenario, right? And if you've never done database integration with websites, this is going to be the first time of, and that's why it's the kind of a basic you have to create. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good question. So what happens when the user enters the information? So you have 4 games, let's say. You have slots for 4 games you can enter data for, right? Make this as easy as possible. Don't go too crazy. Don't make your interface, too insane. Make it nice looking. It's unreasonable is what I'm going to put out there. There's lots of ways you can be unreasonable, okay? And what I mean is keep your game tracking page to one page. Notice there's like one page, game tracker. Maybe have some kind of navigation controls to go to the next week. Maybe a next week button and a previous week button. What if I go to a previous week with no data? There shouldn't be anything inside those game areas, those game fields, right? If I want to enter data or replace data in a currently entered game, I should be able to go in there, change whatever in the fields that came up, and press submit. Whatever you want to call it. Okay? User story in your head and how to lay these things out. We're going to be talking about interface, kind of some interface scenarios. Like if I was going to think about making an interface, what it would look like. We'll talk about that as well to give you a little bit of a hand and trying to create this. This seems complex, but it's not really that complex if you break it down. 4 games per page, 4 games per week, if you will. You're tracking 4 games per week. I'm only asking you to put in 4 weeks of data. Let me go in there and put another week in, and let me go in there and change your weeks. So we're doing full CRUD with the database, full, create, read, update, and delete operations with the database. This is what this is testing. Why am I doing this? This project is going to help you prepare for the exam. What you're going to need to do a full CRUD application live here in the room with me on your own. Okay? So if you don't do this stuff, you won't be good things, and it won't get you ready for the midterm exam. Now, the midterm exam will not be complex, but you'll have to do some kind of operations. If you haven't practiced, I'm going to give you all the code. Don't worry about things like how do I do a create, read, update, delete operation. I'm going to give you all the code for that, right? And the formula for how to do it. But you have to design the application, and you have to create all the details about how this whole thing works, how the tables and the database work, and all that kind of stuff. Game tracking page. So this gives you more detail. The main game tracking page will allow a registered user. And what does this mean? We're going to be covering authentication and authorization in the next coming weeks, which means you're going to have to do security as well. Yes.
They only will be able to see their previous information, or they can...
User should be able to go through and only see 1 week at a time, right? But they can go in there and change anything that's in there. If you're a registered user and logged in, and data related to the 4 games or contests held between 2 teams during any calendar week. Now, some people, all right, they took this as, I only need to talk about 2 teams, like 4 times in a week. I don't know any game that plays 4 times in a week, 2 teams, right? I'm talking about 2 teams per game. So please don't look at this as like 2 teams, 4 times a week. No, 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 that's impossible. I've never seen a game like that plays, 2 teams playing, unless you have some kind of a chess game, or maybe there's some kind of other video game you're playing that you're tracking or whatever. Maybe they play 4 times a week. Be professional players, because I don't know where they find the time for that, right? But it's just 2 different teams that I'm tracking. So each team slot playing. Okay, don't worry about times a week. That's crazy. Game statistics and data will be displayed within various HTML elements and ASP.NET server controls contained in the page, appropriately styled and positioned to enhance the overall user experience. That's just all catch up for you. Design your page, make sure that it works. Like, make sure that the game data is displayed appropriately with the proper controls. I'm not going to tell you where you're going to put your labels and where you're going to put your text boxes. I want you to be creative for yourself, right? And it'll give you variation, right? During each calendar week, each game will include a name, a short description, total points scored by both teams combined, and a designated winning team. What about if there's no winning team? You're going to say none, tie, whatever, right? You can kind of indicate that there's no winner, right? During each calendar week, each team will include a name, a short description, total points scored for a weekly game, or a loss for a weekly game. So there's 2 parts. There's the game, and for each game, and there's for each team. That's for each team for the particular calendar week, for their weekly game. After all the each game and the team for each calendar week, a registered user who is logged in can use a button, link, or other control to submit the weekly game and team statistics to be recorded in the database server. You could use the next week button, go next. If you click next and you've changed some data and you're registered, you're logged in, it'll update everything, right? Or an update button. You can make the button whatever you want. You can decide your layout, right? Anonymous users may only view any calendar week, including game and team statistics, but will be prevented from making any changes. So if you're an anonymous user and you're not logged in, can't change anything. No, just be logged in, period.
How many logins are you allowed?
That's not relevant. It's you just logged in or not logged in. And if you're registered, you can log in. Okay, site security. Your web application must be secure, right? User registration page must be included. A form will allow the user to enter profile information, username, password, email address, whatever. Stored in the database table. We'll talk about how to do that over the coming weeks. Don't worry if you don't know how to do that now, right? People are like, I've never done security, Tom. Yeah, you're right. You've never done it. We're doing it now. We're going to teach you how to do it. So don't worry about not being able to do it. How to do it. Upon successful login, other forms or controls will allow the user to log out and/or modify his profile. Right? So some kind of register page and some way of logging out. And then, this is really important, site security will prevent non-registered users from modifying on any calendar week. So if you didn't make your site security work somehow, you would lose 12 points, right? 12 points. Look at the total number of points out of 68. That's pretty heavy duty if you don't make site security work. Here's a question for you guys. Can you use the default template that comes with web forms? And the answer is yes, you can. But I'm going to warn you, security, right? Automatically, it includes site security, includes all those things, but you have to modify it heavily to make this thing work, right? So I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna push you away from that. There's a lot more modification involved than making it from scratch, and we're going to talk about that as we get towards site security later on. Web application structure. Your web app must be designed using well-structured semantic HTML. You have certain, this is regular stuff, it must be responsive. Content, your JavaScript files must be in scripts. Images and multimedia must be in assets. I'm giving you points for this, to structure your application correctly. These are free marks, in my opinion. Look, 8 marks are free if you structure things the way you should, right? All your code, JavaScript, jQuery, blah, blah, whatever, and your SQL database must be hosted online. This isn't really true. I would love for your database to be hosted online. I want you to look at this line, and because you guys all have access to Azure and Open when I built this this assignment. So the answer is, if you host it locally on your machine and you share your database with me, you get even marks. Okay, you don't lose anything. However, if you host it online and you're able to make it work with Azure, I'll give you a bonus. There's no losing marks. If you don't have Azure, what if you didn't sign up for Azure? You can't make it work, or you can't test locally. But it's got to be on a database somewhere. Okay, that's what I want to tell you. Yes. I don't mind. If you host it on school server, I'm good to go. Wherever you want to host it, as long as I can access it, I'm good to go. If you can host it locally in your school server, great. But if you host it on Azure, bonus. I'll give you a 4-point bonus if you host it on Azure. All right. We talked about before, page comment headers, author's name, student number, date modified, all this kind of stuff we've talked about before. Comment headers for any methods or functions for JavaScript, textual variable names, inline comments, all those kind of things. Now, you've done an external document before for assignment 1. Now you're going to be asked to do it again. Okay? So a team logo. What if you have 2 logos? Because you guys have logos you're building for your portfolio site, right? Or you build your portfolio site and then you got a logo and then you get somebody else's logo and you put them together next to each other. So these 2 teams are working together. I don't mind that. That's on your external document only. On the main site, you can make the site logo be totally different. Okay, you don't have to use the team logo. If you really want to, maybe you can combine the 2 logos, cut them in half or something, and put them together. I don't know. But some kind of team logo. A table of contents. If you're working alone, obviously this wouldn't be a team logo, it'd be your own logo, right? If you're just by yourself, right? Table of contents, detailed description, version history, typography and color section that describes fonts, colors you will use for your web app, color swatches with hex or RGB codes. I want you to talk about those. We're going to be talking about that. And a screen capture section that talks about your screenshots, samples of each of your site's templates, right? Obviously, you can't build your site, right? So you can't do this part, but I will be expecting this part next week. And we'll talk about the stuff I'm looking at next week, okay? I'm on GitHub and some kind of site, right? And it's not Blackboard. Obviously, it's eCentennial made for the other courses as well. It is weighted 20% of your thing, and it says 10% deducted for each day late. You know what? I'll keep time. How about that? So Saturday, Sunday, out of 80. Monday, out of 70. How about that? Does that help you? 10%. It's up there. It's what it is. Okay? My mistake. My mistake, I eat it. Right? Your mistake, you eat it. Let's talk about this for a second. So this is your assignment, this is your project, but I want to talk about the due dates. right? Now the due dates are up on eCentennial. One, it's worth 17 points and 5% of your final grade. So each of these parts are worth different percentages. So even though it's worth 20%, maybe you didn't do so good on your concept, but you really did good on the second part, then one thing can balance the other things. That way I don't give you one big 20% mark. It's based on week, okay? So it's going to be a little easier for you and push you to get things done every week. For next week, next Friday, the 7th, you need to do the following. Your initial project structure setup. That's 4 marks, site structure. Got your project structure, all that stuff. Page comment headers. That means like who's working on it. Give me some comments on each of the pages, right? That's what's due next week. Your first draft of your external document. Things like your team logo, things that you can do. Your team logo, your wireframes. I'm going to be looking at wireframes next week to show me what the pages are going to look like. Info, setup, right? And now it doesn't have to be cloud provider again because Azure in this particular week, this particular year, I have access. But I need you to give me the link by next week of where you're hosting this thing. Okay. Now I don't care if it connects directly to GitHub. There is no. I'm not making it mandatory that it auto deploys from GitHub into Azure. 4 bonus marks. Okay, if you put it up on Azure. So I'm not going to make you do it, but I'll pay you to do it. How about that? If you figure it out. Okay, so that's all due the next week. So I'm looking at these are the marks. So 4 marks for site structure, 2 marks for your internal headers, and if I look at the first draft of your external document, if you look at your external document here, what could I possibly ask for? I'm going to ask, I'm being very specific, and I'm recording this so you have everything you need, right? Team logo, that's required for next week, right? Because it's 1 mark. I have 5 marks I'm looking at, right? It's 1 mark. You can get table of contents in, even if it's not complete. That's 1 mark right there, right? A detailed description of your web app. Yeah, you can talk about that. A game tracker. That's 3 marks right there. You can't really do this too much, right? Your version history, because there is no real stuff. You could put that in there. Half a mark for this if you start off. So there might be half marks for some of this stuff. Typography and color section. Hey, what if you don't know how to get colors and all that stuff? You want to make colors for your website, and I don't want you to use black and white, right? You know, from built off of the regular site. Make your page look like. Choose on fonts and colors. So where do you get these fonts and colors? Well, I'm going to give you some sites for this. One of them for, I'm going to see if there's, maybe if I can remember the links. One of them is, let's see, let me get through here for a second. I want to make sure that I got the links. Here's Azure, Forms, JavaScript, fonts and colors. Here's fonts and colors. So one of them is this color wheel from Adobe. I don't know if you guys have seen this before, and I think I've shown you, for some people who've had me, adobe.com, and you get a color wheel like this, and you can create a, let's say, for example, I want to make shades, right? And I want to make shades of, not shades of gray, shades of blue, right? For those people who are watching a crazy movie. And it gives you the RGB values right here, right? Shades of, you can see that there's the RGB values for each of these. These are your color scheme. One of these as your main site colors, as well as highlights for different things. This is something that you can do. Shades. You can also use compound colors, right? Some interesting, compound colors or complementary colors, right? So, for example, let's say I want to do more of a blue and yellow kind of theme with. So these would be your your button colors, and this would be your main site colors. So you can do that. Or color.adobe.com, you can get them, and look, you can actually just and put it into your darn external document. Done, right? With the RGB values, if you really want to, in a table. Easy to do. There's also another place, another tool. Look at fonts and colors, right? There's one I want to show you. Paladin. Yeah, that's pretty cool. This is pretty cool too. .com, right? By the way, I'm going to put this up on Slack for you guys, so you have those if you don't know. So Paladin, I'm going to put this on. You can actually decide on a palette, color palette. So color palette. Did I spell that wrong? Probably did. Palettes. So one is, so one, right, there we go, that one. And there is also, like I did before, I'll go into all of those files and colors. This one, color.adobe wheel, the Adobe wheel, right? So we'll go into here. So color palette 2, or site 2. But, there we go. That's another one for your palettes. This is kind of cool. And the other one that I like is design site for Android. I think I put it in my my UI UX course. No, I wanted to share that with you, but of course, oh, here it is. I like this one too. What you do with this one, I'm going to put this on your thing. So this is number 3. Color palette site 3. So I'm giving you resources here. Cool one, because what you do is you pick 2 colors. Let's say, for example, I like indigo and green. I don't know. What it does, it kind of gives you what it looks like for your color palette view. And it gives you your palette right here. So it kind of gives you a preview of what it looks like here. I'm just kind of really big, smaller. Here's an example of that. So here's your color palette preview over here. With your highlight would be green. That would be your buttons. And this is what this color would look like. And you would have your color swatch right here, which is kind of really cool. These 3 sites are really, really cool. The other thing is, if you want to use your own typography, they're you know, Helvetica Neue, which is like everyone uses Helvetica Neue. If you're a Bootstrap person, Helvetica Neue everywhere, right? You may Google fonts. So fonts, Google, right? The Google font site is fonts.google.com, where you can decide on a font that makes sense. Like, for example, let's say you wanted to use this one, Baloo Bai, right? This one, right? You can actually use this one. You can say plus on Google Fonts, right? And then you can look at this one, and it tells you how to import this into your site. Use this site, how to use the Google stuff. You can use the standard way of doing it, or you can use an add import, right, into your font. You can include your Google font, this thing, Baloo Bai, I like it, Baloo Bai, right, throughout your entire site if you really want to, and add other ones, right? I like fonts.google. I'm going to take away the selection so you don't see this. Fonts.google.com. I think it's a good site to use web fonts. Some people are like, well, I don't want to use Open Sans. It's very popular as well. Use so Google Fonts. You can choose your font, whatever it's going to be, right? Google Fonts, Tom, because what if the internet's down, right? What? If the internet's down, you know, there must be a catastrophe out there. There must be nuclear war or something if the internet's down, right? So if you don't, no, that can't happen. So I don't believe in that. If it's okay, you can also use Adobe, right? That's another one if you want to pay. That's a paid for service though. So if I use Adobe, right? And let me see if there's ones that are free. There's one that is, if I'm not wrong, yeah, this is the one that's free. Fonts, okay. Now this is totally free, and another one from Adobe that you can certainly use. I'm just going to copy this one for a second, and on Slack as well. So Adobe web fonts, right? Because I want to give you a couple of selections here, just in case you're going to be tied up with some of the stuff. You're like, well, I don't want to use Google. Everyone's using Google fonts. I want to use something else. And if you look at the fonts for Adobe, there's a bunch of specimens here, and they give you an example of how to this thing, right? So it's quite easy how to do this. If you want to pay for it, you can use Adobe Typekit. That's a totally different thing altogether. And that is a paid-for service. It's not something that you can get for free, right? Now, there's brilliant, beautiful fonts here, but you have to be logged in, and you have to have paid for Adobe Typekit to kind of log in and use it. So you can always use your own fonts by going to Font Squirrel. fontscroll.com. I think it's fontscroll. There it's fontscroll. So what you can do here is you can upload a font that you like, that you have ownership to out there. And if I want to, with fontscroll, it'll allow me to download, if I want to generate my fonts, it allows me to upload a TrueType font and then download the fonts that you need to use in your site. Now this is good, but in order for you to use some web fonts, you need to modify your web.config file. I'm going to put it out there to you. Actually, even if you use other kinds of fonts, awesome. You may have to modify your web.config file if you want them to appear properly on Microsoft Azure. There are some configuration details. This font generator. If you want to put the web font, I'll put this out there too as another link. So web font generator, right? Okay. So I mean, it's covering. I'm trying to cover some of this typography and color. This part here. I talked about wireframes already. Remember, I got some links up here already about wireframes. But when you put together your wireframes, and I'll stop recording in a bit. I'll take a break. We'll get a bio break going on. I think we all need it after this crazy project declaration, right? If I was going to design stuff for a second, and let's put together I use Fireworks again for this one. Again, you can use Illustrator or Photoshop if you feel comfortable designing your stuff. This is quick and easy, but you can certainly do the other stuff. Let's say I want to design my first page, and I want to make it like 1024 by 1024 if I want to do that. And I want to do this thing, so I'm modify my background color white. So I'm just designing here. So you can see the bigger page a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to take some of these things. Notice that I don't want my background to be, I want my background to be white, and I just want to create some boxes. That's all I want to do. Now this is one application you can certainly use. And again, let's look at my page. I'm probably going to have some kind of there we go, some kind of navigation, right? Let's say, suppose there's navigation. I'm building up my page, right? Login link, some kind of link like this, login, and there might be another link over here for register or whatever, and some other links as well. I'm also going to have, if I can do it two ways. I can kind of put up, if I think about some things, maybe my games are going to be laid out like this. Games, right? Like this is as simple as you want to get. And maybe a button that's down here that can get me to the next page, and the button that's down here that can get me to the previous page, the previous week, next week, previous week, and then some buttons in here. This is one possible layout that you can totally think about doing, right? And this is one program you can use. The other program I like to use a lot when I have my tablet with me, and you can also download a preview of, is Sketchbook Pro, right? And we'll launch Sketchbook. Sketchbook Pro, the great thing about this is you can physically draw with Sketchbook Pro. And I can choose things like what my pencils are going to look like. And again, this is a free download for the trial. You can certainly have to pay for it if you're gonna buy it. But let's say, for example, I wanted to, oh, that's the wrong one. Boxes, right? So I want to kind of create my boxes the way I want. So here's my page. And again, it's the same thing. So this is my navigation. Let's talk about another kind of theme. Make swim lanes. There's like game 1. Here's game 2. You can see how this is cramped, right? And then you'd have to have some kind of scroll control because it wouldn't be enough. See, game 3 would probably be like this, right? So there's probably some kind of scroll control. I recommend swim lanes. Like we saw actually we saw that the professional game site that they had, FIFA, right? They had swim lanes like this, right? So that's one way of doing it. The other way, well, don't say this one. The other way to do it also is, again, I got my page here as an example, and I'm doing my wireframes, and let's say I got my navigation again. Here's my navigation. And then other things, like, for example, in columns. Again, this is kind of tight to put in, so my games can appear this way, right? Now, this can work information properly, but as you can see, it gets pretty tight all this way, right? But again, you might have some controls here for previous game and next game, and I'm just drawing random. I'm just drawing really rough here. But you can have your game information here. The game. This is the game itself. Game called, and then maybe your team 2. So this is team 1. This is team 2. Yep. I don't need an image for the game. You can have logos. Some people put logos for the teams in here, right? So the logos for the teams like they had in the professional site. Ways to draw this out. You can even do some kind of graph for the team. Let's say, for example, compared to, I'll draw it like this. Maybe maybe some kind of other information here in the team itself. Bubbles of information for how many points scored compared to how many points lost. There's lots of little things to do. You can also do a bar graph. So I get a little bar graph here. So statistics. When you do a bar graph like this, right? So here's a bar graph of the team. As you see, yeah, I'm just making this up as you go, right? There's many ways of doing this thing. A heat map, lots of stuff you can do. And the wireframes for your first page should look something as simple as this. Don't go too crazy colors and typography and everything for your wireframes. Your wireframe should be as simple as possible to give you an idea of what you're building and what your layout is going to look like. Product. This is not a screenshot. This is just a frame, a wireframe of what your stuff would look like, okay? Very, very high level. Professional. So this is really kind of cheesy and not using any of these tools. Mockups, which is, again, free to trial. It's not free, but you can certainly go to mockups earlier last week. So let's say we're going to try mockups. This is cool because it actually has some buttons and everything else that are built in. So I can erase the canvas. This is what I can do here. This is the second time for people who didn't see it the first time very well. If you notice, if you scroll down, there's actually pages here that you can choose, right? Like if I scroll down here, you can see there's normal cards, buttons you can choose, lots of stuff. Like it's actually quite nice, right? Of all the things you want to choose. So let's say, see if there's a browser window. Here it is. Here's a browser window. So I'm going to pull this browser window in. This is why mockups might be the better solution for you. So I've kind of put my browser window into play, and now I can start sizing things up. Rectangle. Again, I might want to do this. And let's say the rectangles, this is the great thing about this, because you can move these things around, right? So I want to do that quadrant idea again, right? And I can make it so it's exact. So I can sit there and go, okay, well, this is, notice 152 pixels by 140 pixels, you know, kind of thing, or whatever it's going to be. And if you don't like this, you can type the numbers in right here. Square, I can make them 150 by 150. This is all online, right? So this is nothing that you have to pay for to start trying it out, right? And let's say there's another game over here. Figure out your layout, right? Now you want 4 games. Now, how wide is this thing? Wider? Yes, you can. Can I make this wider? Yes, I can. You know, so you can kind of put these 4, you know, things in place. You can see that this will work 150 by 150 because there's just not enough room, right? But that's what you do. That's why we do the wireframe for, to kind of figure out the spacing that we need, minimum spacing for our page. And this would be for the desktop page. What about mobile? Right? You can get one that kind of stacks over the other one, and this might be a better design, where you kind of have 4, you know, 4 items, 4 page, 4 this, right? And instead of, oops, I think I can lock that one. I think you can lock this up here, so it doesn't move. There it is, lock. Okay. So what you can do is if I highlight these ones, then I can move these ones around to kind of center them. So maybe what I want is 4 games with information like this, some kind of buttons. There won't be a submit button, but maybe there'll be a button there. And then I'll make another button that's over on this side, so kind of previous and next. Play. I can start filling in a little bit more detail about what my buttons are going to have, right? So, you know, what the button is. If I double click, I think I can get into the button, so I can go previous week, right? And then next, right? Next week, previous and next. You can have buttons like that. You can also have on your, you know, some kind of navigation. You can see that there's navigation bars. You can put a navigation bar. That's in here as well. Tabs. There's all kinds of possibilities here. I know I'm going into detail here, but the reason why I'm doing this is because people have asked me in the past, Tom, I've never done a wireframe. What do you do? I'm helping you with this. I'm showing you where to get some really cool stuff. You can also build it by hand. I'm not going to force you to do different things. I'm looking for something that's more complete. That's why I'm looking here. right? So if that's the case, then these ones have to be a little bit smaller. And that's the great thing about wireframes. I can sit there and kind of look at all these things. And okay, I'm going to take away these boxes. And let's say I want to make these, instead of 150 by 150, maybe we'll make these 130 by 130. Now, this is just for this layout. On that this layout is insufficient, right? Oops. Sufficient, because you might say something like, Tom, this is cool and all, but I need more space, or it's not working for me. What should I do? So much. Be creative, but be reasonable with what your layout is going to look like, right? So let's say, for example, you can see that there's guidelines for this too. A menu right here, right? So here's my horizontal menu. You can start like laying it out here, right? And maybe it expands the whole page, so it goes like this, and then I might be able to put my logo in there and the whole thing. I think like mock-ups is a great wireframe maker. I don't think it's the pricing isn't that high if you want to pay for it either. In this scenario, you can always copy it and use it, because we're not making any money off this. I'm putting this out there for if someone watches this video and tries to say, hey, you're telling students how to steal. Definitely, I would recommend to put in your documentation, say, I use mockups as your wireframe maker, right? Because I think we got to give these guys props. They've kind of put together a really cool product that's online, right? But what you'd want to do is kind of go in here and then image of this. If I actually go smaller, maybe a little bit tricky, right? But you can do one of these things, so you can actually reduce the size of your screen, so you can see the whole image, right? There's my image for the mockup, and I can put other information in here. Maybe I'm going to, because there's a lot of white space in this particular layout. A layout, you're saying, well, how does this look? Do I like this? And maybe you're like, nah, I don't like it so much. Or maybe I want to make these wider. So I want to make the games. But then, what about the button? Maybe I got to make the screen, the minimum width for the screen, a little longer, right? So I kind of got to design the screen so that, are pushed down, like to here, let's say. And then I can make these ones like I said before, like quadrants, right? So almost like, now they're not perfect, but again, we're just designing what the layout might look like for your game tracker, right? It would be something like your, if you're logged in, this would be log out, right? And then you might have something like, or maybe you'd have login and register, so home, I spell? No. Register and login. Let's say you have these pages, right? So you can put those in there too, so that you can see that. You can also add other spaces in here as well. So if I double click, if you want to kind of push those to the right, you can write justify, so that kind of thing, right? And you can also pull in your boxes. There's lots of control that you have here to kind of set this stuff up. Let's undo that change. I'm going to put this one here, and you want to add some spacing over here for like a rectangle. You can do that. You can combine the elements to make it so that it's not so bad, right? Do one of these things. Hold on a second, we finish. There it is. So it looks like these things are empty. Here, so home, login, and register looks nice, and it's kind of pushed to the right. And maybe you're going to have your logo in here, so you're going to put in a logo swatch. Maybe I want to put in some kind of placeholder for a logo that I'm going to put up here in the top left corner, which you can do. So I'm going to kind of put this in here like this. This is my logo for my page, right? You can see it coming together. Like it didn't take me long to put that together. It shouldn't take you that long to imagine what your layout's going to look for your game tracker. One of the things I'm going to be looking for next week for your first concept, right? Questions so far? Yeah. Yes. They would register here, would take them to another page. You'd have to create another wireframe for the registration page, and another wireframe for the login page, and another wireframe probably for other pages that you have that you want to include. Any other one. Minimum here, maybe you probably want to have a contact page too. I haven't put it in there, but you could add additional pages as you see fit, right? I don't need them though. The only ones I need you to do is register, login, and some kind of logout link when you're logged in.
What document for this
external document. You can make a Word document. You can use PDF. I recommend either Word or PDF for this one. About how to combine this and put them up on your GitHub site as well. All right, we'll talk about that. Okay, so this this piece. We've talked about that ad nauseum. Lots and lots of information. Lots of ways of doing your wireframes. You know what I want now. Okay. Screen captures are screenshots. All right. You can't do that next week, so it won't be this one. And notice that there's 2 marks for wireframes. Probably, I want you to do as many wireframes as you can. So I'm probably going to give you 2 marks for this, and I'm going to be hitting these sections. 1 mark for this table of contents because you're just setting it up but there's nothing there, right? Maybe half a mark for your detailed description because you might have to put more stuff in there. Look at these kinds of things to try and get your external document as complete as possible for next week. I'm going to check that. We're going to do a mass marking. One of our hours is going to be me coming around, sitting with the partners and going, this is your mark, and actually putting it into the system with you, all right? You're not going to hand it in, and I'm not going to do it like later on. Even though it's due Friday, if you have it ready for me on Wednesday, I'll mark it that particular day right away. And delay and say, well, I don't have a partner. If you don't have a partner, what are you going to do? Put up on Slack, I need a partner. Partner, right? Please don't try and do this alone. This is a lot of work, as you can see, right? This is dumb if you do it alone, right? Work together, a couple people. Now, this is a great thing. Once this project is done and you work with somebody else, let's say there's another group for the final project, which is next half of the semester, teams, right? People that have worked together to make that project, because the next half semester is going to be a e-commerce site. So when you make an e-commerce site, I'm going to teach you how to do that, but you're going to need 4 people for that kind of manpower, right? So 4 people come together to make that final project for next half semester. There's no final exam. I'm not going to make a final. I think I'm going to do something. I might do presentations for the. I'm going to try and do presentations so that there's no final exam. I'm going to try.
Present to the class?
Yes, and get you to present your e-commerce solution. What does it look like? But that means you got to be ready for that day. So it's gonna if it's. Okay, so this is what to do on next week. Notice that, and I'll stop recording in a second, I swear. Well, I mean, I got to go through the details here in one recording, so you have everything for your assignment here, right? Do next week. If you would notice, the week after that, another 5%, and you have things like this: 1 game on the main page working, 1 game, not 4 games, 1 game working by next week. Next week coming up, but the week after, right? Your main game tracking page is set up. Your database structure is set up. Your method comments and contextual variable names are set up. Your updated external document, because you're going to add some screenshots now. You have the ability to add a couple of screenshots in your external document. GitHub repository. That's what I'm checking for the week after that, right? And then the final week is where you set up site security and admin pages, right? Site functionality with an updated responsive design and structure. So remember, so if it only works on your desktop, up here to realign stuff. We'll talk about how to do that, right? Wait, let me finish. You can ask me after during the break. Add any additional inline comments, and your final version of your external document should be due. I'm looking because you may have to add additional screenshots or modify some stuff. Fill in some details that you didn't have in the first part. So each week there's going to be an update for your external document. Each week there'll be an update on GitHub that I'll be checking, right? Because if you're using GitHub properly, then each week you're going to be putting things up to GitHub that I can check, right? Final game will be due, or your final game track will be due on this last week. So that's October 21st. That's exam week. Exam on the midterm test on the Wednesday, and then your final game is due on the Friday. Now I won't be able to check you because it's exam, right? So that's the one time I'll have to mark you afterwards. But other weeks I'll be physically sitting with your teams that if you're here. Mark that day if you're finished. If you're not finished, I'm just going to move on to the next team, right? So I'm trying to get some of the marking done as we go. Questions around this thing before we stop? Relative questions you can't ask me during break. You want everyone else to hear. It has to be asking, all right?
If you're structuring the way that, let's say, month 2 on one side and 2 on the other.
These are things you can talk to me on the break. Guys, thank you very much. We'll take a short break. Let's take 15 minutes, right? Because we have a kind of a longer, this is kind of like the first half. we'll actually start doing the database piece, okay?